In 1948, Hamas started with a simple intent: to make healthful living happen across the communities we serve. For over 7 decades, we have sought to offer world-class, affordable consumer products, medicines, healthcare, and mobility solutions. Across our consumer brands, Hamas is a leader in most categories in which we are present. Our hair oil brand is a market leader in Bangladesh. Hamas has always sought to be at the forefront of delivering best-in-class healthcare and medicines. We are the leading importer and distributor of medicines at private retail. Through our EU GMP-compliant pharmaceutical plant, we are the largest manufacturer of oral solid dosage forms of medicines in the country. Hamas Hospital is a growing hospitals and laboratory chain, providing affordable healthcare to the emerging middle-income customer. We have always believed in the potential of the next generation and have worked towards creating an inclusive world where no child is left behind. Our focus has always been to ensure that the needs of the communities across our nation are met. At Hamas, we believe that every Sri Lankan deserves a better tomorrow, to live a life filled with daily moments of joy, and most importantly, an opportunity to thrive and grow. In our onward journey, we will continue to invest in diverse and passionate teams, create meaningful offerings, champion a more inclusive world, and positively impact all our stakeholders. Hamas, making healthful living happen for over 7 decades.
In every endeavor, there's a North Star that shines a light on its path to success. Each milestone is greater than the one which precedes it. The beacon that illuminates our journey and steers our vision of the future is family. We are a dynamic family of professionals, connecting multiple industries on a global scale. At Sri Lanka Vacations, we are an internationally trusted travel partner, excelling in MICE tourism. Curating unforgettable memories is what we do. We believe that for truly inspired experiences to take place, they should be sought in equally stirring destinations. And that's where we at Sri Lanka Vacations are geared to assist you. Prudential Shipping is where we set sail on our mission of providing an extensive range of maritime services. We offer our expertise in full vessel agency services, freight forwarding, offshore logistics, ship-to-ship operations, and NVOCC agency services. We don't stop there. We are also moving some of the world's most valuable cargo across continents, thanks to our strategic and technically savvy team at Premium Trading and Logistics. We deliver rapid solutions via sea, air, and land, with trading, customs house brokerage, ship chandling, haulage, and warehousing facilities. We are a resolute and future-ready corporate family, with a global network spearheading solutions that empower you to achieve your goals. As we celebrate 25 years of being an essential cog in the machine that's driving many global ventures, we are geared to meet the diverse challenges of tomorrow head on. Together with you. We are Mendis One.
Wherever you go, whatever you do, never be alone. Stand on back.
Every step you take, we'll be there by your side. Today, tomorrow, and for days to come. Ceylon Bank, the bank with a heart.
Good afternoon, everyone, and we welcome you to the session on understanding ESG frameworks and standards that are available for financial institutions on ESG financing. In today's session, we aim to explore the various standards and frameworks that are available for financial institutions so that they can align their internal procedures and processes so that they can tap into global finance opportunities and the global funds that are available, as well as get technical support. So we have an interesting lineup of speakers joining with us today. And the format of today's discussion is that in the first segment, we go through the various standards and frameworks that are available. And in the second segment, we go through the various case studies of companies, both locally and globally, who've adopted some of these standards and their implementation process of it. And in the third segment, we have the Q&A session where the audience is encouraged to post their Q&A questions to the Q&A chat box that we have, and we will post it to the relevant panel member. With that, I'm Imesha Disanayaka, Senior Research Associate at the Economics Intelligence Unit of the Ceylon Chamber, and I'll be guiding and moderating today's discussion. So without further ado, let me introduce the first speaker we have with us today, and she is Nirnita Talukdar. She is the Regional Coordinator, Asia Pacific, United Nations Environment Program, Finance Initiative. And she'll be taking us through the United Nations Environment Program's Principles for Responsible Banking, Principles for Sustainable Insurance, as well as the UN-supported Principles for Responsible Investment. Nirnita, over to you to take us through on these UNEP frameworks.
Thank you so much, Imesha, and also thank you to the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce for inviting me to be a part of this. I will share my screen, so just give me a second. You can see my screen, right? Yeah.
Yes, works well.
Awesome, thanks. Firstly, before I start talking about what we as UNEP-FI are doing, I just wanted to kind of highlight why is it important for financial institutions to be looking at climate or even towards looking at SDGs. So a lot of times, especially in Asia, we feel that there is a huge gap between where financial institutions on how they are investing and also in terms of the movement towards achieving the SDGs or the Paris Agreement goals. And so what we would like to highlight that obviously, I mean, we've been realizing, I think, especially in the last few years, how climate crisis is like really getting aggravated. We are seeing floods, so much of floods, droughts, etc. in Asia, in South Asia. And obviously, a lot of the times it does not even mean that, you know, that the emissions of a particular company, I mean, of a particular country is way more or lesser. It's just that where we are investing, how companies are basically looking at emissions are actually affecting every part of the world, that the climate crisis is really, really getting aggravated and there's a major urgency. So financial institutions really need to start looking at climate change, start looking at how they are contributing towards a positive impact in both the environment and the society. And within this, it's important. That's why there is a need for us to work with financial institutions to ensure and to help support the financial institutions in moving towards the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Agreement goals. So just to highlight what are we as the UNEP-FI. So the UN Environment Program for Financial Institutions is a partnership between the United Nations and as of today, more than 500 global finance sector. The way we work is basically we are working in partnership with banks, insurers, and investors. And what we do is we are helping in developing the world's guiding norms on mainstreaming sustainable finance. So for example, how do you look at climate mitigation? How do you look at adaptation? What are the things that you should be looking at while moving towards SDGs? So we work with the banks, we work with insurers and investors, the finance sector themselves to try and come up with these guiding norms. And the last bit is that we are working on co-creating research. We have a number of peer exchange forums, obviously because we are a global framework, global finance sector. We are working with the global finance sector. So we help in also achieving some kind of consistency in the approach that financial institutions are looking at sustainability. To highlight, so last year we completed 30 years of UNEP-FI. In 2006 we had, and since I will be talking a little more on these specific ones, but in 2006 we came out with the Principles for Responsible Investment. And in 2012 with the Principles for Sustainable Insurance. And in 2019 with the Principles for Responsible Banking. I will be talking through these three things more in detail later, but I also wanted to highlight that UNEP-FI is also the conveners for the Net Zero Alliances. That is a Net Zero Asset Owner Alliance, Net Zero Insurance Alliance, and a Net Zero Banking Alliance. We are also piloting the two frameworks, which is the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosure and also Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosure, which has just come out. And you must have also heard about the ISSB, so we are working very closely on also the ISSB. So how do we basically align finance with the SDGs? So these are the main key thematic work streams that we presently have at UNEP-FI. So that would include your climate change, nature, SDGs and impact, pollution, and social and human rights. And within this, we're working with through either working groups with peer-to-peer exchange, and we're working with thematic experts to come out with guidelines on all of these on how finance could be looking at each one of these impact areas. As I mentioned, we are also piloting the risk disclosure framework, which is TCFT and TNFT. TNFT is going to start from the final development will be completed by September 2023. So now coming to the two main frameworks that we are working with. So the principles for responsible banking. So UNEP-FI's principles for responsible banking, the PRBs, are actually the world's foremost sustainability banking framework, and UN is the only organization working specifically with financial institutions towards sustainability through this framework. So what is this framework exactly? So basically it is looking at the bank's portfolio, looking at the countries and the landscape of the region or the country that the bank is based in. We are working with the bank to help support the bank's strategy in aligning with either the Sustainable Development Goals or with their Paris Agreement targets. So we work with banks, we support them through capacity building, we do a number of one-to-one engagement towards providing support to these banks so that they can actually deliver on their sustainability plans. To highlight what are the 6 principles for the principles of responsible banking. So the first one is alignment. Is your business actually aligning with a positive impact on the society? Are you looking at how do you, are your goals, the sustainability plans that you have in place, are they working towards achieving what your country's NDCs, what your country's Paris Agreement goals are towards your country's achievement of the SDGs? The second is impact and target setting. How do you look at positive impact? How can you reduce your negative impact? And once you have your main impact areas in place, then what are the targets that you should be looking towards? The third one is clients and customers. In this, we really, to actually bring effective change in the economy, we really need to be working along with our clients and ensure that there is a change in the real economy. So how can we be doing that? How do we engage with clients in a way that we're able to actually have an inclusive and green economy in a way that is more sustainable? How do you engage with stakeholders beyond investors and shareholders? The principle 5 is basically governance and culture. Basically, how do you bring in leadership buy-in? Why is it important that when you talk about sustainability, it's not just a small group of people looking at reporting, right? So it's about bringing in a bigger change in terms of the governance and culture of the bank. So how do you look at that? And last one is transparency and accountability. Is that it is important that banks start wherever they are in their journey and highlight and be quite transparent about their processes. This is a long journey. It is a difficult journey. And they're, of course, like aligned with that, there is a lot of challenges when banks start their sustainability journey. So things do not have to be perfect, but what's important is that we are transparent about it. So with UNEP-FI, as a part of the PRBs, we provide a number of implementation support. As I was saying, we do a lot of capacity building programs with our banks. We do one-to-one support. We have regional support sessions that we provide. We do a lot of peer exchanges in terms of the regional support. And we also have what is called the working groups. So through these working groups, we basically ensure that banks come together so that the guidelines that UNEP-FI comes out with are actually industry driven and is able to work within the industry. And we ensure that these working groups kind of comprises of banks from across the world. So there is a significant regional representation in each of these working groups. This is a 4-year journey when a bank signs on to the principles for responsible banking, because obviously this doesn't mean that after 4 years the banks stop working. This just means that initially we give 4 years to the banks to put things in place. We ask the banks in the beginning to analyze the bank's impact on people and planet. Now, even within the same country, actually depending on your portfolio, your impact areas can be very different. So for example, in Thailand, we have 2 of the biggest banks. One is lending to more of corporates, and the other one is a retail banking. So then the retail banking, and it is more government and state aligned. So then the impact areas for that would be more focusing on financial inclusion, focusing on achieving the SDGs. Whereas for the other bank, which is a corporate bank, for them, the main impact areas then were climate change and adaptation. So that's how basically why it's very important that we are able to look at impact analysis, understand why we are looking at sustainability, and where is my bank best fit to ensure that we are serving the regulations of the country, we are serving the people within our country and within the region. The next one is, once you've decided the 2 impact areas that you would be looking at, how do you set targets? What are the targets that we should be looking at? So for example, again, when we're talking about financial inclusion, in a number of countries, looking at how many the gender-based disaggregation becomes quite important. And sometimes when you're talking about climate target setting, what is it that your high emitting sectors are, those type of things. So going beyond just for banks, obviously, as you would know, it's important that we look at our own emissions per se, the scope 1 and scope 2, but also it's very important that we're looking at what our clients' emissions are, and we're able to engage with our clients in an effective manner. So the second part is, how do you start setting and implementing those targets? And the last one is accountability and measuring progress. So when a bank joins the PRB, we ask the banks to highlight and be transparent through a reporting process that we have, and we give the banks put up these their targets, their progress vis-a-vis the PRB. And as UNEP-FI, we then go through the targets, go through these reporting with our banks to provide and support the banks. This is an extremely confidential process between UNEP-FI and between the banks themselves. We do not talk about our review outside, but we ask that the banks highlight and put in a public document where it is in terms of what it is doing in terms of sustainability. And again, as I said, that this is a 4-year journey. And so when a bank joins us, we don't expect banks to have everything in place. It is a journey, and at UNEP-FI, we try to provide as much support to each of the banks in their 4-year journey. This is basically just to highlight in terms of market representation where we are in terms of the banks. So in Asia Pacific, as you can see, we have 70% of the top 10 banks in terms of asset size already a part of the PRB. However, this is absolutely not to say that we are only looking at bigger banks. We have a huge number of small banks that are UNEP-FI members and actually doing increasingly well in terms of PRB implementation. So just to give an idea of today, we have more than 350 banks that are a part of the PRB specifically, and out of which 90 of them are from Asia Pacific. Okay, that was on PRB. Now coming down to the next topic was the principles for sustainable insurance. So what is the importance of insurance? So as you would know that as risk managers, as risk carriers and investors, the insurance industries plays a very, very important role in basically ensuring sustainable and economic development. And so that's why we started the Principles for Sustainable Insurance in 2012. And the 4 principles for sustainable insurance basically are that we will be embedding in our decision-making environmental and social and governance issues. We will work together with our clients and business partners. We will work together with other stakeholders, and we will demonstrate accountability and transparency and regularly disclosing publicly our progress. Again, we have a team that is looking at the principles for sustainable insurance. We do try and provide as much support to each of the insurance companies that joins us to support them in their sustainability journeys. Now, how do you join the PRB or the PSI is basically the first step is that the principles for responsible banking needs to be signed by the bank's CEO. And again, this brings us to the governance bit, that it is important that there is a leadership buy-in, because sustainability means that there has to be a buy-in across your bank on the importance of looking at responsible banking or sustainable insurance for that matter. It's the same 3-step process for both PRB as well as the PSI. The second step is once you apply for your membership by applying for the UNEP-FI membership through a form that we submit, that we ask you to submit, we will be having a call with you to see how we could provide better support, what is your understanding, what is your need, and then you become a UNEP-FI member. And post that, you can promote your bank's commitment across your social media, across your news announcements, and we do the same from our side. As I was saying, we are also the conveners for the 3 net zero alliances: the Net Zero Asset Owners Alliance, the Net Zero Banking Alliance, and the Net Zero Insurance Alliance. I won't go into detail out here, but with the net zero alliances, obviously with the PRB and the PSI, we are focusing on the SDGs as well, and also the commitments that we ask for are more aligned towards your country's or your regional ambitions. Of course, we encourage banks to be as ambitious and as credible as they would like to be. But with the net zero, there is obviously net zero by 2050 is what we are looking at, and what we are working towards with the banks that are a part of these specific alliances. So what are the benefits of being a signatory? I think the first and foremost is in terms of consistency, that because we are working with so many financial institutions, as mentioned, we're working with more than 500 financial institutions today. And because of that, there is a consistency on what is sustainable finance and how could you be looking at sustainable finance in a manner that is significant, that is credible, and that takes into consideration your country's, your regional aspirations. The second important thing is obviously because you're working with different peers from different groups, you would be at the cutting edge of sustainable finance. As mentioned, there is consistency because it is one framework, it is an ambitious framework, but we ensure that we are looking at the regional, the country-specific expectations and ambitions through a regional framework. So though it's a global framework, there is regional and country-specific alignment to it. So that's obviously really, really good in looking at sustainable finance. You're able to look at it in terms of new business opportunities, because as we start talking about going green, or we are talking about moving towards SDGs, there are a number of new business opportunities that become at the forefront, and this enables you to actually achieve that. The second thing is obviously it's a risk imperative, because when you're looking at climate, more and more regulators right now actually are also focusing on looking at climate risk as a very important risk. So this enables you to be looking at it from the risk perspective, but also move on from there towards actually looking at impact. How do you engage with your clients? How do you ensure that you're able to look at the economy as a larger whole in terms of achieving real impact into the world? We also have a lot of peer exchanges, which helps you to access a global community of peers. You would be at the forefront of industry transformation. We provide the support because of the work that we are doing with you. We are able to ensure that you're reaching new clients, new customers in terms of through our global roundtables, through our regional roundtables. And we are working with a number of significant stakeholders. So that obviously helps you in strengthening the trust with a lot of other stakeholders. And most importantly, I guess it's you are receiving expert knowledge, you are receiving capacities, which is in Asia. Again, when we talk about challenges that most of the banks are facing while doing, most of the banks or insurance companies that are facing when they are looking at sustainable finances, data, its capacities, and it's basically resources. So by joining UNEP-FI, we're actually able to support you in all of these three ways, specifically in related to capacities and in terms of you're looking at data issues. Yeah, so that was about the PRB and the PSI. I've been also asked to talk about the PRI. Now, as I was mentioning, UNEP-FI was started the PRI. And today PRI is a different organization because it became really big. PRI is presently UN supported, but it's not necessarily a part of UNEP-FI. And obviously, as mentioned out here, the PRI is a collaborative investor-led organization. Again, as mentioned, it is supported by UNEP-FI, and we are working very, very closely with the PRI through our Net Zero Asset Owners Alliance and the Investment Leadership Program. These two basically looking at how do you engage with asset owners on climate, and basically beyond that, the asset owners that are actually doing significantly well, we are also engaging them through UNEP-FI's Investment Leadership Program. So PRI, obviously from its name itself, it is an organization for investors, for asset owners and asset managers. Today, it has a community of over 5,000 organizations that are a part of the PRI. And again, how do you apply to the PRI is basically once you gather your documents, you complete the online application, there is a fee to be paid, and after that you would be a member of the PRI. There are quite a few benefits actually of being a PRI member, and it's that you are invited to more than 100 events and workshops every year. There's a PRI in-person event that takes place every year. You are able to access a number of resources, looking at your organization and how to basically strengthen your organization's ESG activities, and number of signatories, reports, and assessments that you could be going through. There are regional relationship managers in mostly, I think, most countries at the moment, and they would be able to support you in your journey. And similar for PRB and PSI, there's a lot of collaboration on how do you look at sustainable finance when you're a part of the PRI. So that was specifically on the three frameworks that I'd been asked to speak about, was the PRB, PSI, and the PRI. I also wanted to just quickly take a moment to highlight on the specific capacity building that UNEP-FI is doing. So the first one is the Principles for Responsible Banking Academy. Now, as we understand, there is still a lot of need for capacity building within each of our banks to look at sustainable finance. And it just does not mean that the sustainability team needs to keep understanding more. It's the relationship managers, for example, how do you speak with your clients? Understanding among your boards and your CEO members on why is it important to look at sustainable finance. It's also important for the larger number of people within your banks or your financial institutions to understand what sustainable finance is, because only then you will be able to actually achieve an impact. And so that's why we developed the Principles for Responsible Banking Academy. It only started last year, and this year we did the first pilot of the PRB Academy in India and Mumbai. And the idea behind this is a 4-part course The first course is only for board members and CEOs, which is a more high-level understanding of what sustainable finance is. The second course is for sustainability departments, where we deep dive into sustainable finance. The third course is for risk officers, and again, where we are deep diving. And the fourth one is for relationship managers, and then again, other specific people like the GMs, the DGMs in your organization, because they also need to, everyone needs to kind of really have an understanding of what sustainable finance is. It doesn't mean that everyone needs to become a climate scientist by the end of the day, but everyone needs to have a working knowledge so that they're actually effectively able to look at sustainable finance. We also do a number of other courses like the environmental and social risk analysis, looking at it from the risk perspective, and then climate change and TCFD trainings, which is again looking at broader, looking at how do you look at TCFD, what are the other disclosures, etc., that you should be looking at. And so these are the separate courses that we at UNEP-FI are doing. I think I'm done with my presentation. I hope this was helpful, but happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Sure. Thank you, Nirnitha, for taking us through on the UN-supported frameworks, as well as taking us through on the benefits and the support you provide on the capacity building and the implementation process. So we'll take Q&A at the end of the session, and let's move on to the second presentation that we have with us today, which will be on the presentation on the SERIF SPTF, which is the Social Performance Task Force, which focuses on the universal standard for social performance management and also on the client protection pathway. And to take us through this, we have Jürgen Hammer, who's the Managing Director of SPTF Europe. Jürgen, over to you.
Hello. I'm just trying to see how I can upload my presentation. You know what, if you don't mind, can you upload it for me, please?
Sure.
Yeah, that would be nice. And I will just, I'll ask you to move on. So thank you very much for inviting us to this session today. So I come from the microfinance side. I've been working in banking for many years. Worked for many years in a microfinance investment fund by KfW, and joined the organization that I'm now representing, SPTF, about 6 years ago, full time. If you can go to the next slide, please. Who is SPTF? I mean, SPTF was basically created in 2005 on the experience of over 40 years in microfinance. Microfinance, as you are aware, started in the 1970s, 80s, with this double objective of being financially sustainable and at the same time providing a social impact, social benefits. There had been many initiatives to try to evaluate this part of what is the social part of our activity. And in 2005, under the initiative of Ford Foundation, SPTF was created with a very specific approach, because there were two options, basically, to say we need to be transparent about what are we really achieving on the social and environmental side in a sector that is promising a balanced approach on financial, environmental, and social objectives. But there was nothing available. So basically, SPTF started in 2005 with a very specific approach to say we have two options. We can either do a top-down approach, define standards so we can evaluate transparently what we achieve, or to the contrary, we use the already 20 years of experience in 2005 of an entire sector and make the actors collaborate so they can jointly define that language that is most adapted. And that's exactly the approach of SPTF. We are a membership organization that unites the entire sector, from the MFIs or the microfinance banks and microfinance organizations to the regional and local networks, to the investors, the DFIs, basically the entire industry. And we help them as a network to define what is the impact and what is the social performance that they are promising. The second specificity is that we said very soon, one thing is to define standards, but we need to be able to evaluate them. So we have been working together with another organization, and we're now forming a joint organization, SPTF and Cerise, which had a lot of experience already in auditing. Because one thing is to define principles, but we need to assess where we stand compared to those practices. And that bottom-up approach was very useful because it helped from the very beginning to include all the on-the-ground experience of the organizations and help them define the language, to define the language that is needed to evaluate, and also measure to see where we stand. If you go to the next slide, please. Can you? Okay, thank you very much. So what are we basically doing as an organization, SNBF, SPTF, and Cerise? On one hand, by uniting the entire, let's say, universe of microfinance and microfinance practitioners, is to together to develop, to set standards for best practices for social and environmental performance. Once coming from the practitioners, we of course promote those standards, so they are largely adopted. We are working in an environment where those evaluations are not obligatory; they're all voluntary. So we need to have voluntary buy-in. We help the market to assess where we stand, but which is much more important is once we know where we assess, it's not a one-stop. It is really to improve, to continuously improve practice. Developing benchmarking and reporting based on this evaluation. And in our sector, really what we see as the last step is then the practice of demonstration, meaning getting ratings. Once you have done all that work, you can get an external evaluation to see where you stand. So what do these standards look like? If you go to the next slide, please. Basically, these standards, again, on a market consultation approach that lasted from 2005 to 2012, more or less, the practitioners, the MFIs, the microfinance organizations, and everyone agreed to structure the question of social and environmental responsibility into the 7 dimensions that you see here. I will very briefly go into them. The first dimension is about the social strategy, defining what exactly are your objectives. The second dimension is about leadership, meaning what is the involvement of your board of directors, of your management, and of staff. A third dimension is about client protection, and we'll go a little bit specifically into that, of course, very important aspect. Mistake. Third dimension is about products and services. How do we make sure that the products and services are not just standard products, but they're adapted to the specificities of very often, let's say, vulnerable clients and populations that our sector is serving. The fourth dimension is client protection, and we'll go a little bit into that specific aspect, of course, of making sure clients are protected. The fifth dimension is about human resources, aspects like training, etc. The sixth dimension is about defining together, and that's a sensitive dimension, but it's important to see what are responsible growth objectives and returns for an industry that has a multiple bottom line approach. And the seventh dimension is environmental performance management. So these are universal standards that were built over a 7-year iterative process involving the practitioners, listening to the MFIs, to the networks, what is working, and what is useful for the sector. And as I said before, those standards, and if you're interested, you're happy to reach out to me. I can give you all further information, but everything is free, available on the website. Those standards are then broken down in practices and concrete examples for every organization to see where it stands. What I would like to do is do a very short dive into specifically client protection standards. In client protection standards, we are, of course, in do no harm, but it is something very important, again, which is built on voluntary participation. So the client protection standards are basically 7 standards about the value, the benefits of products to client, the issue of over indebtedness, of course, the access to information, the setting of prices, which is also a very important issue, especially in the microfinance industry, which has often been criticized for excessive or high pricing due to the very small loan sizes, the respectful treatment of clients, the data or the information of clients on their rights and on their access, the treatment of complaints, and last, which was added very recently, because a little parenthesis, as a standard setter, of course, every 5 years we have a full process about reviewing those standards to make sure that evolving practice is integrated. We also included the aspect of governance, which is a very important aspect when you look at client protection. If you go to the next slide, please. So, as I said, what I would like to focus on today is specifically the aspect of client protection. We must recognize that in our financial services industry, especially microfinance, client protection is still a voluntary issue. There is no specific legal obligation. So it is a voluntary process of organizations to do the right thing to do and make sure that we focus on the well-being of customers. I would say, let's go to the next slide. The client protection, the standards on client protection, many of you might have heard in the past of the SMART campaign. The SMART campaign had worked for many, many years to define what is responsible treatments of clients in the inclusive finance industry. The SMART campaign basically rolled on 3 years ago. We had worked together with the SMART campaign over the last 10 years. And since about 2-3 years now, the work that SMART campaign did had been totally integrated and taken up by SPTF into the universal standards. And these client protection principles basically define a common language on what is a protected client. Issues like over indebtedness, pricing, privacy of data. It's a definition of responsible practices to protect the client. If you just go very quickly on the next page, I will not go much into detail, but that is just to show you, for many of you might have heard it, the history of client protection in inclusive finance and microfinance. As I said, we started from 2003 really to work on the definition. SMART campaign is certainly let's say many might have heard about the SMART campaign. The SMART campaign was the first to define those principles, and since 2018 they are fully integrated into the work of SPTF and series. Now, in the past, the SMART campaign and client protection was just basically a yes or no. Either an organization fulfilled 100% of client protection, which very much, let's say, overvalued the big organizations, but a lot of small organizations did a very good job. So since 2021, we, as SPTF series, have taken over fully the client protection piece into the standards, as I showed you earlier. And if you go to the next slide, client protection today, again, is a voluntary process in our industry. You can go to the next slide already. I wanted to show what exactly the client protection pathway looks like. Basically, what we, together with all the stakeholders in the industry, and as I said in the very beginning, this is really a fundamental approach that we had from the very beginning over the last 20 years, is as SPTF and series, we accompany the practitioners in the market to help them develop responsibility evaluations in a way that is practical and implementable for them. So the client protection pathway, as it is now, basically consists of 3 levels. On one hand, it is a voluntary commitment. The fact that an organization commits formally with the board, to protect clients and have practices in place that protect clients. But this is just the first step. The most important step, and this is something that we have always, let's say, practiced within SPTF and series, is to say evaluation is not just reporting. Evaluation is the basis to improve. So we have been working over the last 15 years to collect examples and case studies of best of practices. Once I have an evaluation of where I stand, identify my weaknesses, continuously improve, as we said, in a mostly voluntary environment, so we can make sure that our clients are protected, and the services that we provide really provide value to the clients. And the last step in the client protection pathway is the reporting. If you quickly go to the next slide, please. So in the past, for those who know the SMART campaign, in the past, SMART campaign was a pure commitment. When SMART closed down and SPTF series took over that work of the client protection piece, we said, one thing, we want commitment, but we also want disclosure. So today, signing up to the client protection pathway basically allows an organization to do an evaluation. There's no judgment. There's simply to say we need to have transparency on where do we stand. And of course, we commit to constantly improve our internal processes to make sure our clients are protected, and we provide value through the financial services. The next page, if you go to the next slide, this is the current, let's say, group of investors in our industry that has voluntarily committed to implement those client protection practices. The investors who commit to implement those practices help the organization to assess where it stands in terms of client protection, pricing, etc. All the elements that we saw above. I mean, the presentation will be available for you, of course, that you can look into detail on those different aspects of what is client protection in our industry. Next slide, please. As I said from the beginning, we don't see the evaluation process as a step per se, but we really see it as a first step to improve. We are all in a learning phase on what concerns best social and environmental practices in a financial services industry. So a very big aspect of our work was to not only develop a tool to assess, but to provide the examples of practices. All of this is free. It's free access on our web pages of SPTF series. So an organization can assess weaknesses, identify priorities, and has all the resources available of organizations that have already developed actions to implement pricing, transparency, client protection, etc., in their processes. And that is a very important step. We offer trainings, we offer webinars, we have facilities that support and co-finance organizations who want to take this job on and make sure that they improve their practices on specifically the aspect of client protection. If you go to the next step, the next slide, please. So this is what I just mentioned. It's the tool that allows each organization to assess its practice. The tools are free. They're online. Each organization can do this at a first level, and then identify areas of weakness and has access to a database bank of tools and processes and procedures and policies by organizations that have worked on specific aspects related to client protection. So that is the second step. One thing is committing. Second thing is improving, basically making sure that the weaknesses that you identify can be addressed. And that is where we have everything. All of these information is accessible free of charge online on our webpage, and you can improve. And then comes the last step. If you go to the next slide, please, which is the demonstration. In the past, with SMART, organizations were either SMART certified or not, meaning compliance with 100%. We did a lot of work with the practitioners in the market to say what we want to value is the progress. There are certain aspects of client protection that are, we would say, undiscussable to make sure clients are protected. And we identified in 2 years of work with the practitioners, which are those practices on over-indebtedness, on customer protection, on confidentiality, etc., that are non-discussable in order to be a responsible financial organization. And that is the bronze level. And there are 2 additional levels that show improvement and further implementation and development of client protection. If you go to the next slide, please. So this is the current level of certified organizations. I must say this is only in the last year and a half, because we just took up all the client protection work from SMART a year and a half ago. But especially the commitment to client protection is picking up a lot. We always consider the client protection is to be a bit hard in terms of wording, a non-brainer. Of course, we need to protect clients. We need to go further and even make sure that we have impact. But in our industry, all of this is voluntary. So we really invite organizations to join that process and make sure that we agree on a language on what is a protected client in our industry. The next slide, just a quick overview about organizations who have the possibility to certify in the 3rd step that I showed earlier. And again, these informations are available in the presentation that you can that will be shared with everybody. If you go to the next slide, we have just developed an e-learning tool. You can see the links on in the presentation that will be shared with everybody. So it helps organizations to take that step voluntarily, learn about what is best practice, see weaknesses, identify weaknesses. When we say go deeper, it's really improve internal practices in the organization to make sure clients are protected. And then the 3rd level is the qualification, meaning an external auditor view who looks and validates client protection for the larger industry. If you go to the next slide, please. What are the benefits for a financial organization or a financial service provider of joining that pathway? Of course, it is a recognition of commitment, and I don't need to repeat that unfortunately, we have had moments of criticism in our industry about client protection over indebtedness, criticisms that were certainly partially justified, but that did not reflect the right picture because a lot is done on a voluntary basis. So yes, the more we agree on using all the work that has been put into that for the last 20 years of how is a client protected, the better we are protected also from those kind of criticisms that regularly come to our industry. So joining that pathway, committing to client protection, sharing transparently self-assessments. All these tools are free. We can just invite organizations to do this work and communicate and thus help hopefully prevent from future, let's say, issues we have in our market. That's the benefits for the FSPs. And if you go to the next page, benefits for investors who are searching for organizations who work responsibly with clients. The pathway and the evaluation of the pathway of course, helps investors to identify organizations for future cooperation and investment. But it's also a fantastic tool to help to work for investors, to help their investees to improve their practices. Because what I said from the very beginning, and that's a fundamental element, we do not see social environmental performance as a one-stop. It's a process. We're all learning. Financial evaluation, we didn't learn that overnight. It took us a long time to agree on how to present financial results. And we are still on that path. So it is really helping identifying where you stand, and with all the tools that are available, and as an investor, help your partners, your MFIs and financial and microfinance organizations improve the practices as you go. And I'll continue with the last aspect of what we're looking at. In particular, I know it's a very quick overview, but I'm happy to answer any questions. And of course, you can reach out to me by mail. We are currently in the final phase of adapting these standards, specifically for digital financial services and the digital providers. What is very important is that we do not have to start from scratch. A digital financial service is still a financial service to a customer. So many of the aspects of client protection and of responsible treatment don't have to be reinvented. They just have to be seen under the specific angle of digitalization. What are the risks, opportunities of digitalization? And are we certain that digitalization is still protecting customers with all the let's say, technology that digitalization brings? We all know that there have been scandals about very high pricing, hidden pricing in digital financial services. So all of those specific aspects of digital are brought into that work, which is now in a last pilot testing phase, and will be published by the end of the year. So yeah, happy to answer any question on that. And I think we go to the last slide. Yeah, that was just to say, why do we need client protection in digital finance? Digital finance creates a different relationship between the customer and the organization. It also brings a very new type of organizations into our markets of finance. So we need to be sure that for new organizations that do not come out of the financial services space, but rather from the technology space, they do understand the specificities of client value, client needs, and we make sure that those new actors are also looked at under these specific aspects of digitalization in a financial service. And I think that's the last slide. Yeah, this is just what I already said. Why do we create standards for digital providers? Because we believe that we need to build on those 20, 30 years of financial services in microfinance. So we don't start from scratch, but we build on those learnings of what is a protected client, what is a responsible financial service, to make sure that the digitalization as a different means of access covers those learnings that we have in the microfinance area over the last 25 years. This is it from my side, and I am happy to be available for questions later on.
Thank you, Jürgen, for providing that candid overview on the universal standard and the dimensions, and with a special focus on the client protection. So with that, we move on to the second segment of the session today, which is on the case study. And the first case study we have is on the CIMB Malaysia's experience on the United Nations Environment Programme Principles for Responsible Banking, as well as the Net Zero Banking Alliance. So to speak on CIMB's experience, we have Luans here, who's the Group Chief Sustainability Officer of CIMB Malaysia. Here, it's great to have you.
Hi, thanks for inviting me.
Thanks. So let me start by taking your initial remarks on your overview of the initiatives taken by CIMB Group towards achieving the principles for responsible banking as well as the Net Zero Banking Alliance, and how you really leveraged on the UNEP network and the resources to support your journey as well.
Thank you. So maybe I'll start just by quickly introducing CIMB. We are based in Malaysia, so that's our headquarters, but we are really all around as the ASEAN region. So Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, Thailand, Cambodia, and Philippines. Those are our big operations. And we are a bank, so we do consumer banking, business banking, as well as wholesale banking. So that's us. Now, in terms of sustainability and the principles of responsible banking, we started our journey in 2018, I would say late 2018. And at that point, sustainable finance was, or ESG or sustainability wasn't something that anyone in Malaysia was really thinking about. And when I told people this is what I'm looking at, they give me weird looks and go, hey, but you work in a bank, why are you caring about environmental and social stuff? So when we started, that was the kind of context and background. So really, we were pretty much on our own when we started doing this. And one of the things that really kind of accelerated us was joining UNEP FI. So we were one of the 30 banks that were the drafting members of the principles for responsible banking. So these were new in 2018. And really through the participation in this exercise and really being locked up in a room with 29 other banks who, most of them were global banks and, really well ahead on the journey, that's really how we kind of learned and built our network. And that network has really helped us in terms of just, being able to ask really basic questions on how to start, very, very simple and detailed operational things that, you'd never be hearing how to do in a conference or a webinar. So that's how, supportive and helpful UNEP FI has been for us.
That's great to note. And if I may just focus on some of the challenges and obstacles you face when you were implementing some of the commitments set out by the PRB and the NCPA, and how you also address these challenges.
Absolutely. So as part of the commitments as principles, as a member of the Principles for Responsible Banking, we needed to commit to at least two focus areas where we set targets and also reported progress. Of course, there are plenty of other material issues. So our two areas are climate change and financial inclusion. Of course, there are many other areas such as human rights, employees, culture, governance, etc. But these were the two where we thought, we had the biggest impact given where our client profile. So a lot of our clients, for example, are in browner industries. We also have a lot of agri clients. So climate change was a big one. And also because we are in a number of countries with large populations and underbanked populations. So in terms of challenges, surprisingly, we started with climate change first, and because we joined NZBA, before NZBA there was this thing called CCCA, collective commitment to climate change, before NZBA came along to commit everyone to the Paris 1.5 degree goal. Now, through joining those I would say groups or commitments, yes, it ties you to a certain number of things, and the criteria are pretty strict. But on the other hand, the guidance and frameworks and, I would say even like tutorials and tools that are given are actually really, really good. So we progressed really quite quickly early on the climate front. Because of the peer networking and the tools and the training. Financial inclusion is something that's we've been doing naturally because of where we are, but in terms of really target setting, doing the impact analysis, this is still relatively new for us, and this is something that we've been learning a lot from UNEP-FI and PRB through the sessions that have been given.
Yeah. So if I may focus on the reporting and the measurements. So how did CIMB report and measure the progress and impact towards the goals and the targets set by PRB, and also achieving towards the net zero targets?
So really on climate, we have a massive scorecard, and we've got measurements for each of our material issues. But just zooming in on climate, this was a it was not easy for us. So obviously we started with scope 1 and 2, which is our direct emissions from our operations and from our electricity. And we did our baseline in 2019. And it actually took us about 2 to 3 years to get the reporting right. And even then, through the assurance process, so I think in the third year, we started getting assurance on our climate data. Only in the third or fourth year, we managed to get stuff right. And even now, the smaller countries that are starting to come on board into our reporting, they're still struggling. So it's a gradual kind of thing. So that's our scope 1 and 2, where we're trying to get to carbon neutrality by 2030. Our larger target is our financed emissions, which is the aggregated emissions of our clients. Now that one is a much harder ask, and because you have to get the emissions reporting of all our clients, and that includes not just the big corporates, but also the SMEs, and down to the individual mortgages and auto loans, right? So we use a tool called PCAF, the Partnership for Carbon Accounting Financials, and that really helps a lot, and it's got all the conversion factors. So we took some time to do that. We've also now started assuring our scope 3, or trying to assure our scope 3, just to illustrate how important scope 3 is. When I started, I was thinking, scope 1 and 2 is so big. So just to compare between scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3, within scope 1 and 2, scope 1 is 5% of scope 1 and 2. Yeah, so about 20 times less than scope 2, which is electricity. But scope 1 and 2 put together are 0.2% of our scope 1 plus 2 plus 3. So scope 3, which is what we do with our clients, is 99.8%. So that's how important scope 3 is, and that is really our biggest impact on the world.
Sure. And what are some of the other specific targets and goals related to environment and social sustainability CIMB has set in order to align with the United Nations Environment Programme's framework, as well as the net zero targets?
So we have in place, a number of targets, including, what we do with our vendors, including our gender diversity in our board and our management, sustainability training and capacity building. For financial inclusion, we're starting to set those targets on financial inclusion and as well as financial health, because in some of the more advanced countries, the issue is not so much that they don't have access to savings or finance, but really that it's that financial literacy and financial ability to kind of not worry about whether you've got enough money to retire. So all those are part of our measurements. Yeah.
Sure. And if I may ask, how are these targets monitored and reported so that you can green the loan book and also reduce the risks in your lending and investments?
We track these religiously every month or so, especially on our sustainable finance side. So when you think about our sustainable finance and how we are going to get to net zero, it's really two sides of the equation. One is, how do you minimize harm or minimize risk, or minimize the brown, right, or emissions in your book. And then on the other perspective, it's also, how do you create positive impacts? How do you increase your green? How do you get your clients to do more green stuff? And early on, we started with a policy, which we call our sustainable financing policy. And that was focused on our lending or financing to our big corporates. As part of that, we kind of put in a rigorous process, starting with the relationship managers in the front line, and then with some screening criteria. And if they failed the initial screening, then they will come, the case would get escalated to group sustainability, which is my team, to kind of do further investigations. And we actually, we could either say, okay, we think your risk is well managed, you're in line with our sector policies, or we can say, you know what, you've got these risks, I need you to agree to these action plans before we will lend you money, and we will actually track whether they meet their action plans on an annual basis. And really, if the risk is too high, then we could also say, no, we're not going to proceed with this particular loan. So we started on the risk side and setting up sector policies. In fact, we were the first emerging market bank globally to set a policy on coal, which targeted coal exit entirely by 2040 in line with Paris goals.
So moving on to examples and the practical life examples, I'm sure the audience is also interested to know what has been some of the examples of that have been availed to you as a bank in terms of innovative financing products and services, as well as what has been those sustainable financing products that you have also offered to clients.
Mm-hmm. So we've been doing a lot of things apart from just the straight green loans, green bonds, and things. One of the types of instruments that is really popular is the sustainability linked finance. And you can really apply that sustainability linked finance to loans, to even deposits, to bonds or treasury instruments. So for example, we did we have a treasury program where, whether the client is, trading or hedging FX, we agree with the client a set of sustainability KPIs, and if they meet the KPIs, then they get some sort of financial benefit from us. And on the other hand, depending on the goal and the company, if they don't meet the KPI, then it can be a case where there's a penalty and they will pay to us. And of course, we take that money and we commit it to charity. It's not a money-making mechanism for us. But by negotiating and setting those sustainability KPIs in line with our clients' strategies, and a lot of time we are pushing the clients to stretch their ambitions and to ideally reach global credible standards like Paris scenarios, so that we kind of encourage them to go even further. So that's an example of something that we've done. Also on SMEs, we've got a holistic kind of, it's a financing partnership club consulting one-stop thing where we help SMEs to improve on their sustainability journey.
Sure. And one last question from you. How do you engage and educate your employees, your customers, and also how do you collaborate with the regulators on the PRB and the NCPA initiatives?
With a lot of effort. So, just getting people internally, so CIMB's got 32,000, 33,000 people in our workforce. So just trying to get them to understand why we should do this, why you can no longer do something you've been doing for the last 20 years in your job as a banker, educating them about, this is how you talk to clients. And it's very scary for them because half the time the client knows more than them. So that we're setting up a sustainability academy internally with our clients. Good thing you asked. So this conference that we have, we do this every year. This is our 5th year running. We have a conference to kind of bring our customers on board, because if they don't get it, we are not going to be able to it's much harder for us to kind of get them moving and to do sustainable finance with them. So there's a lot of that. We work very closely with NGOs. So for example, when we put out our policies, we will engage with them to kind of take a look at the policies and go, hey, is this good enough? Is this per global standards? Am I missing anything? So there's a lot of work that we do. Also with the regulators, trying to working with them to formulate policies, to also educate the other banks, because we really need all banks to be on board for this to really work.
Sure. Thank you so much, Luann. This was a very interesting session, and thank you for your interesting insights as well.
Thank you so much, and thanks for inviting me.
Thank you. So next we have the case study on the SERIF SPTF, which you heard a while ago. And this will be done by Mark Wichet, who's the Chief Risk Officer of AMRED Cambodia. And AMRED Cambodia is a microfinance institution who has adopted the SERIF SPTF standard, and he'll be taking us through the client protection pathway that they followed as well. Wichet, over to you.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for having me today. So first of all, I would like to introduce myself. So I'm Mark Wichet. So I have been in AMRED for 15 years, and the experience have been well-rounded across economic analysis, project management, product development, sales, and risk. So as the Chief Risk Officer in AMRED, my responsibility include risk oversight and report to the risk committee and the practice across AMRED, including but not limited to credit, financial, operational, strategic, and recently in charge for the environment and social risk, which is one of the important that we try the best to embed the impact, positive impact to our client at the core of the strategic objective. Could you have please to the next slide? So. Sorry, could you please move to the next slide, please? Okay, next, I will not spend here. So, so today my objective to share experience in AMRED, but importantly, let me introduce the AMRED. So AMRED is a microfinance deposit taking institution which have been licensed from the Central Bank of Cambodia, and we have been in the market for more than 30 years. So we have been engaged to the root of the pyramid, meaning we have served more than 500,000 customers, mostly in the rural areas, and we provided a wide range of products and services. And our mission is to provide the wide range of financial service, product and services to help our customer to develop or expand their business, agriculture, and of course, at the end of the day, is to contribute to their living standard. So that is our main objective. So could you move to the next slide, or I can move it? Hello, can you help me move to next, please? I will not. So AMRED is one of the leading microfinance in Cambodia that invested by the well-known investor. Mostly they are developing financial institutions which they have the mission to improve the social well-being of the Cambodian people. So we are invested majority by Advance Group, which is a member of the SPTF, and the rest from FMO and IFC. So as you know, they are mainly focused on the social impact. So that's why social mission is one of our core strategy. And thus, as AMRED, we are committed to social goal. So please move to the next slide. So as part of our long-term strategies, we want to be setting the standard in Cambodian microfinance as the responsible financial service in Cambodia. And we have to ensure that our product and services have to create a positive impact to our client, social, and environment. Just for example, we have credit and we have saving, we have other type of services to serve the the bottom of the pyramid as well as our client living in the rural area. So they can access to finance importantly as the financial inclusion is quite low among rural area. So we have partnered with a kind of e-wallet provider. We have partnered. We are a member of Barco, which is the e-wallet, a kind of digital payment of the central bank. So this facility help our client to do official transfer money across the banking industry with low price. So it's very important and benefit to our client in general. Could you move to the next slide? So as social mission is part of our core strategy, so and we as an institution always adopt the customer protection principle. So what does it mean, SPTF certificate mean for AMRED? To ensure that we can showcase our best practice in customer protection that include in our policy, our practice, our investment in staff training to ensure that they adopt what we have been written in the policy and translate to improve the well-being of our customer. So doing that, it help represent our best practice on customer protection standard. For example, we as one of the leading microfinance to sign memorandum of understanding, firstly in 2019, 2018, if I recall correctly, to join with social investor and other, member of Cambodian Microfinance Association to prevent the over-indebtedness of our customer by adopting the strategy that to ensure that the lending will be favorable to the business and to the well-being of our customer. And thus, this represents our strong relationship with our investor, our shareholder, our regulator. Importantly, it is one of our differentiation strategy from our competitor to build up as competitive advantage. Could you have me move to the next slide, please? And thus, AMRED have been proud to be one of the financial institutions to certify since 2016, since Smart Campaign, and then we have recertificate to gain the Smart Campaign, and recently 2013. We have been the first institution to be certified with the gold standard by MGRIA with CP pathway recognized by CERISE and SPTF. Please, could you move me to the next slide? I have two slides, but I will not jump into detail as Jogan have been presented. The SPTF have a universal standard of customer protection principle. It have been, quite thorough and very detailed. It have been incorporate the 8 indicators of customer protection, and combining all the indicators, it have been gone through a lot of, many indicators, more than 100 indicators to ensure that it have been positive impact benefit to the client. So to get the certification, we have gone through many challenges ranging from, how to inform, how to provide better information to the customer for better decision. We have to ensure that our lending will not make our customer at the end of the day fall into over-indebtedness. So we have to ensure that lending assessment, lending methodology will be based on cash flow, not just a matter of collateral or not just a matter of aggressive sale to achieve the target. All of this have been, discussed, engaged, have been presented to discuss among executive member, board of directors. So doing that, we need to make sure that our growth strategy align to the, to the growing business segment, economic sector, and favorable to the development, to the expansion of our customer business or household or or living standards. And importantly, we have embedded in our policy to prevent, to prevent our loan disbursement to the high-risk sector to environment. For example, we need to protect the labor child. We not invest in the business that employ the child labor. We need to make sure that our environment will not lead to because we work with the rural community, so they mostly do farming in cassava, in cashew nut. So we have to ensure that the loan disbursed to this kind of smallholder will not to do deforestation to get the land and do their farming activity. So we, of course, at the initial stage have a lot of gap, but when we work with MBA as the independent rating agency, they have been advised us. It's a kind of learning journey, require commitment from different, from the board, from the top management to ensure that we have enhanced our policy and it's suitable with the client protection standards. And thus we have to ensure that all of these have been trained to our staff, and at the end of the day, it has been impact to the client. Could you have me move to the next slide? Sorry, could you have me move next one? Because I will not touch all of it. So the last slide of mine. So what we have been learned during the journey of certification with CRI and SPTF. So I think we have 5 conclusions, and it's a kind of a lesson learned to any FI who want to engage with how they are well adopted the customer protection principle. The key lesson was number 1, we think that CRI and SPTF certificate is tough but achievable, given the heavy indicator that we need to reflect in our policy procedure guideline. But with the commitment from all the key stakeholders, the shareholder, the board, and the management, it have been it could be implemented. Secondly, as Julian mentioned, the CRI SPTF CP password have been available. We can download to do our self-assessment, to again our policy, again our practice, and thus we can understand in advance the gap to take immediate action on the improvement to make sure that we adopt effectively on the customer protection pathway. Number 3, I think during the certificate, we need to have the team who is a focal point of contact to coordinate all the different stakeholders in the company, from the product, from the IT system, from the marketing, from the customer handling, from the lending, from the business development, to ensure that they adopt the best practice in customer protection. Number 4, we have to make sure that the board, the shareholder, and the management and the staff fully engage and get the full information as the buy-in in the first step. Least but not last, the board and management must be committed to work together to adopt the best practice in customer protection. It has been reflected as the core principle in the long-term strategies of the banks. So that's the end of my sharing, and thank you so much. So any question, you feel free to ask me or reach me via the email. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard, for taking us through MRET's experience as well as the lessons you learned through adopting, say, SPTF standard as well. With that, we have Shiranti Kurin coming up next, who is the DGM Sustainability and Corporate Communications of National Bank PLC, and she'll be taking us through Sri Lanka's experience in some of these ESG financing, as well as HNB's experience in the sustainability standards. Shiranti, over to you.
Thank you, Ineshan. Thanks to the Sri Lankan entrepreneurs for organizing this awareness program. I think it's very timely and opportune considering the Sri Lankan banking industry. And Inesha will go over the slides for me. I think it's better that you take over the controls. I intend to speak for about 10 minutes and share that experience. And before I begin on the first slide, I will just, I'm not going to read through the slide. Mitigating environmental impact, social impact, and improving governance becomes very important. And I share a simple but memorable case study that struck us and impacted all of us a few years ago. In 2016, in the Table district in Aranayaka, the Samasanaga mountain faced a massive landslide following and there are two reports, one by the National and by on this as a course event study. For the environmental impact study, in terms of better and
Sorry, Chiranti. Sorry, the line is breaking. It's a bit distant.
Okay, I try to speak up a bit louder. So on the environmental impact side, there was a disaster that shocked the world. The landslide started at the crown of the mountain and it covered a massive area. If you see some footage on this, which is available on PRI Benefits now, this has been the first and there were 127 lives. This village was having an annual turnover of about $180,000 according to research reports. And it was a fire train. This was village in the city of Table district. Now, looking at the total impact of it, so lots of lives of livelihood, need for resettlement, urgent assistance by government and NGOs and companies and well-wishers and donors. But then, on the social impact other side, we need highway, we need vision. We provide access to education, and health facilities, and otherwise need away from the main of activity for funds.
Sorry, Chiranti, we don't hear you at all. Maybe if you can switch off the video, maybe you'll be audible then. Slightly.
Extraction and mining, construction of highways. Can you hear us now? Okay.
We can't hear you. You're quite distant. We just hear you faintly. Hi, Chiranti. Maybe we'll move into the Q&A session, and if you can try and reconnecting again, we can have you again. So we'll move on to the question and answer session. All right. So the Q&A chat box has been flowing with questions. If I may start with Nirnita, because you have a hard stop in a few minutes time as well. There's a question for you asking if the United Nations Environment Programme's principles for responsible banking is aligned with the recently launched IFRS S1 and IFRS S2. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, sure. Firstly, sorry that I would have to leave in 15 minutes of another meeting, but thank you for the question. Yes, absolutely. So we engage quite closely with ISSB, with IFRS, and in fact, ISSB also sits in our kind of the governance body that we have in terms of having different stakeholders that are a part of the body. So as we move forward in terms of our disclosures, etc., we are definitely taking ISSB into consideration. I can't hear you, Misha.
Sorry, I was on mute. So there has been another question on the UNEP FI frameworks, whether you analyze the performance of various client companies and in each country, and whether you align that with the country SDG goals, the NDC goals, and what has been the process in that.
Yeah, I did answer that, I think, through chat, but very quickly. Obviously, the real economy is where the change really needs to be, and financial sector is placed at a very unique position where they can actually impact how clients basically are working. So that's why with UNEP-FI, we directly work with our members who are financial institutions. And we always, when we are working with our members, the idea is that they would be then engaging with our clients, with their clients in their portfolio, be it from high emitting sector or otherwise. So the impact then goes from there. So with financial institutions, they work with their clients, the companies that they are investing in, and that is how we are reaching the real economy. But we are at UNEP-FI, we are directly engaging with the financial sector stakeholders. Having said that, I mean, as we move forward, we're obviously trying to engage with different stakeholders. So within that, at times we're engaging directly at companies, but our main members' portfolio is only financial institutions. And once financial institutions, basically, they're able to look at the impacts that they want to focus on, and they're engaging with their clients based on the specific impact areas, be it climate, be it human rights, be it SDG implementation. And through that, we ensure that we are taking the country's specific ambitions, the country's plans, the country's policies in mind, as well as the bank's portfolio. So with that, we're able to ensure that we're reaching directly the clients, as well as being able to affect the SDG implementation, the NAPs and the NDCs.
Yeah. And if I may pose the same question to Jürgen on the Series SPTF standard, if there are any, whether you go through analyze the performance of various companies and see if it aligns with the country's goals. You're on mute, Jürgen.
Excuse me. Yeah, sorry. What we do is based on years of feedback from practitioners, and I think what I tried to say from the beginning, there was a conscious approach since the very beginning, because there were different approaches on how you can define those standards. It was to involve the practitioners from the financial services organizations, banks or MFIs, to the networks, to the investors, etc., to define what they see as the best practice. And those are, I mean, because they're voluntary, of course, they are kind of practices, guidelines of best practices. But what we do is, from the very beginning, we said those guidelines are important, but we need to be able to assess the performance levels. But then the rest is voluntary. We are in a market where we don't have IFRS or GAAP accounting obligations across the world. So a lot of it is voluntary. But of course, the pressure and also the experiences of markets where things did not work out is helping to implement that on that basis.
I'm doing a sound test now. Can you hear me better?
Yes, we can hear you better.
Okay, I will switch off the video, but I just want to bring into your attention, since Chenbi, if you can put the second slide, we are fairly mature in this journey as are other banks. We have also followed IFC standards in terms of aligning the sustainable banking and financing principles. And we are also well onboarded with the Central Bank Sustainable Financing Roadmap. Now, we as a banking industry in Sri Lanka are at a critical juncture in selecting what standard should we use for certification and accreditation. Now, in this process, right, again, I will, in the interest of time, avoid reading point to point, but this has been a carefully curated journey from 2014, and the milestones are clearly etched. I'm sure Chamber can share these slides with the participants today. And many of them, we have showcased this story as well. So it's fairly much more, popular and well known in the industry as well. We work firstly very closely with Sri Lanka Banks Association, and then we are well on our way with the central bank's roadmap. Now, the critical points for the banking industry and bankers that are being faced and what we need to address are how relevant, what is the most relevant certification? That becomes very important. What are the case studies? What are the approaches that are very relevant for us to embrace and get on this journey? That is critically important. And also, ease of implementation. Are the banks ready? Which banks are ready to what level? What is the status of readiness? And what is the ease of implementation? In terms of ease of implementation within the bank, say you certify using one standard, what is the status of readiness in terms of level of maturity of the bank in the journey, level of priority in the boardroom discussion? Is the board serious about it, right? Are they as serious as they are about cybersecurity, for example, right? So where is the boardroom priority in the boardroom priority index? Does this feature? And then in terms of level of capability in the executive leadership of the bank, where does it lie? I personally know there are some very inspiring, very passionate young managers who are driving this. There are two such experts in Sri Lanka's banking industry who work well, very closely, and as experts with the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. But that conversation has to go above that into the C-level, and you need to have hands-on C-level executives driving this, and that capability needs to be built in. So we need to do a lot of work there and bring them on board into that kind of C-level dialogue, thought leadership around this topic. And the other thing is the level of motivation at staff level, because certification is not something that can be done by 3 people or 10 people at head office. There has to be a whole organization, galvanization towards this in the reporting exercise, in the way of living, in the way of doing business. Right? So responsible business means it becomes a part of your practice. That becomes critically important. And then finally, scalability and cost. So what is the size of the bank? What is the size of the bank's business? What is the operating model? And then is the cost endurable to the bank? Because we've evaluated all the standards. And say, for example, speaking of HNBA, we are at the critical juncture of evaluating standards for certification. And that becomes very important for us in this journey. And so what happens is, in terms of certification, relevance in application, ease of implementation, status of readiness of the organization, scalability of this across PAN band, and cost. So these are the real considerations. And this is our sustainability roadmap. And I think I can safely speak on behalf of the industry. The banking industry, in varying degrees among the banks, have reached a level of reasonable level of maturity. And thank you everyone for presenting different standards. We ourselves have done a compare and contrast grid of all the standards. I have actually in my tablet something done by my own team, comparing all of these along the lines of implementation. We are now ready to execute and implement. Right? So we are now talking of actioning a concept, a framework. That's where we are right now. I hope you could hear me. So, and again, to conclude on the relevancy of this, environment, social, and governance, I use the example of Bengal district, Aranayaka, Samsara landslide. That becomes really important. I urge you to read either the JIPA report on this or the European Union Scientific Journal. This is why ESG reporting and sustainable financing is important. On all of this, having said that, people in Sri Lanka need access to education. They need equal access to sanitation. and equal access to health. So we need to build the roads, we need to build the bridges. And the construction industry also has to be a viable industry and a sector in our economy. So the job is not to do nothing to safeguard, but to do things responsibly and adopt standards of governance and principles in doing our business. So with that, I'd like to conclude. I'm sorry for the technology glitch at the beginning. I can share some transcript notes for everyone in the audience if they're interested in their legal. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak.
Sure. Thank you, Chiranti, for sharing those insights and as well as Sri Lanka's readiness and the challenges Sri Lanka face with ESG financing and adopting some of these standards. So we have one more question on the vehicle loans. Maybe Jürgen, you can take it, whether there are any guidelines available on the vehicle and auto loans.
Where's the question? I didn't see it. Can you?
Sure.
I'm trying to see the question. It's in the chat box.
It was in the Q&A.
Answered bit because I provided my side of the answer. So maybe because of that, it's gone to the answer bit.
Sorry, can you please line it out again? So, because I was trying to find
if
it.
you can speak on it and then.
Yeah, the question
just quickly,
explains some sector-specific guidelines being placed with auto loans. So what I've mentioned is that UNEP-FI develops guidance documents for best practices on key topics. So to the specific question on auto loans, we do have presently a larger guidance on how financial institutions could be looking at resource efficiency and circular economy. So that bit does come to an extent in this guidance. However, just also to let you know, in the next year, we are looking at much more sector-specific guidances. I have to double check if automotive loans are a part of that, but I don't think it should be. But for next year, we will be working with experts in the field to be specifically looking at sectoral guidances. As of now, we don't have that. And since I'm talking, I am so sorry, but actually another meeting started like 15 minutes back, so I have to leave. But again, thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you so much everybody for listening in. Really.
Thank you very much, Nirnita, for allocating time and sharing your insights.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
If I may pose a question to Richard, can you share a few examples on what has been the innovative financing opportunities that were available for you with the adoption of the SAFE SPTF framework as well as the client protection pathway? Richard? Maybe I'll pose the same question to you, Jürgen, from your experience with working with clients, and what has been their experience?
I mean, what our experience has been is that because we're in an environment where responsibility is a voluntary approach and it's not a standardized approach. We in the very beginning of SPTF, I mean, there were various options on how to develop something that is implementable. And so we really started to reach out. That was the very beginning setup of SPTF, to be an organization where all the stakeholders across the industry work together, and where we build very much from practices and needs on the field. So everything that has been developed comes out of these discussions between the practitioners and mostly the financial services providers, to see how can we develop best practices, make sure the clients are protected, but as I showed in the beginning, to really cover the global field of responsible services.
Sure. Chiranti, if I may pose a question to you on, given that you know the Sri Lankan context, how can some of the Sri Lankan financial institutions collaborate with all the stakeholders, including customers, regulators, investors, in adopting some of these standards? What's your take on that?
Well, I think Sri Lankan banks and finance companies too can come together and work on this and collaborate. There are enough industry bodies to do this, specifically for us, the Sri Lanka Banks Association. That is our primary vehicle and our channel. And that is how this journey started as well. And I think the Ceylon Chamber also can support us. Specifically, I have put in the chat box, banks need to evaluate status of readiness, maturity, boardroom priority level, skill of executive leadership and motivation of staff. In all of these areas, we can come together, do training, do technical awareness programs, and make this a boardroom agenda and get really serious about this. Beyond doing flood relief and disaster relief, post an event or incident after we have been lending, for extractions or mega projects or something like that. So, yeah, some of these researchers that have been done pre-event, pre-climate event, during event and post-event, government engagement, banks engagement, these have been tabulated in great detail. That's where we need to take a cue from, and we need to not work in our own silos, but come together. I strongly believe in collaboration, and without that, if we don't collaborate, we will be only passing the cost of compliance to the end customer, which is the depositor out there, and that's not fair. So we need to work together and build on our synergies.
Sure, Shiranti. Thank you so much. With that, let me pose one last question to Jürgen on what has been some of the challenges and issues that you have understood from working with your clients in some of the disclosures and targets that they have to meet and the reporting mechanisms.
That's a very big question. To be very frank with you, I think it's our availability to transparency. Transparency is something that is not easy because in reality, we don't like to be compared. And if you look at accounting, financial accounting, for many years and decades, every industry had different accounting processes. And it took us a big financial crisis to realize that we need to agree on language. So we can compare things. And I think that is the big challenge in our industry, that mostly all of the work that is done and that's presented by the different organizations is done on a voluntary basis. We are very happy to see the regulators and the central banks getting involved in those topics. Central banks and regulators don't have to have the same depth of analysis because we are working on positive outcomes. The regulators and central banks are more on a risk perspective, but it's extremely useful when the regulators inspire themselves from all that work that has been done by the industry, because we want this to be implemented and implementable. So I think this is really a great learning in this entire process. Every 5 years we review that language so we can integrate additional learnings. It is a voluntary process, but I think we are moving into the right direction increasingly to constantly include learnings, but also really work together along the full value chain. And that is, I think, the specificity of SPTF and Cerise and the very early setup to say we want to have all the stakeholders involved in the process. And the initiative really comes out of the microfinance organizations themselves, because they have to practice that.
Sure. Thank you very much, Jürgen. And with that comes to the conclusion of today's event. And I thank the panel, the speakers very much for the insights shared, as well as allocating your time towards this amidst your busy schedules. And I thank the participants as well for your active participation and keeping this event very eventful. Thank you, everyone.
And I guess you share the presentations, no, with the participants.
Yes, we will.
You have the emails. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. We're very happy to, go deeper or share experience or answer questions that you didn't have time to raise in this seminar. Thank you so much for including us in that.
Sure. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.